The following is a special presentation on AZTV 7.
Welcome to Before You Vote. I'm Mike Broomhead. This AZTV special program is here to help you, the voter, understand the 2022 midterm election. We'll be talking with candidates and data analysts to give you insight into who and what is on the ballot. Today we're talking about the U.S. Senate race here in Arizona, but we'd like to make a disclaimer. At the taping of this show, we have reached out to Mark Kelly on multiple occasions, and we've not yet received a response. However, we are still open to doing an interview with Senator Kelly if he would like to come on and do the show. Today, we'll be talking with Republican candidate Blake Masters, first-time candidate and former chief operating officer at an investment firm. Then I'll be talking with the president and CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce about the governor's forum that happened last week and get his insight as the moderator. And finally, I'm joined by former Arizona Governor Jan Brewer in studio talking about the importance of the governor's debates and what it was like for her in that capacity. We'll be back in exactly 60 seconds. Welcome back to Before You Vote. Joining us right now is Republican candidate for United States Senate, Blake Masters. Blake, welcome to the show.
Mike, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about some of the big issues in the country. We know recently the White House celebrated the Inflation Reduction Act on the same day that the stock market went down by over 1,200 points. It was kind of bad optics in the minds of many people. Where do you stand on the economy and inflation, real inflation reduction?
Well, I think the Biden administration has just completely blown it. Like, they've completely failed, and then they're lying about it. You know, how out of touch do you have to be to throw an inflation reduction party on the day where the numbers come out? The government data was published that showed inflation, core inflation, actually increased from July to August. Core inflation increased 0.6%. And then Biden gets on TV and lies and says, oh, inflation's zero. Inflation's going down. No, inflation's at 8.3%. Core inflation increased from July to August. That means, Mike, this problem is getting worse. And then in Arizona, of course, in the greater Phoenix metro, inflation's not the national 8.3%. Inflation's 13, 14, 15%, depending on how you measure it. But Arizonan families are getting crushed. The Biden administration and Mark Kelly caused it. And I think they're so far out of touch, they're hoping people buy the lies, but it's not going to work.
When it comes to the immigration issue, another issue that happened this week, in an interview, the vice president said that the border is secure in as much, and then she went on to explain what she meant by in as much. And then there was a lot of blowback from some border sheriffs in Texas. You're in Yuma talking about this. What are you seeing and what needs to happen?
The border is not secure. Kamala Harris is either stupid or she knows exactly what she's doing and she's just lying. I don't know which one is worse, and actually maybe it's both. The border is not secure because when I arrived at a certain section at the Yuma sector today where the wall ends, we literally saw, it was a small group, I'm told, about 30, 35 people just walk right in. And they surrendered to Border Patrol. They're processed. This group was mainly from India, from Peru, and from Cuba. They walk right in. They came from a cartel stash house about 200 meters south of the border. The cartel is funneling about 1,000 illegal aliens through this section of the Yuma sector every single day. And most of these people, they won't be deported. Most of these people will be ferried out to the interior. Some will stay in Arizona. Some will go to Maryland. Some will go to Connecticut. But the border is not secure. You've got 300,000 illegal aliens coming here illegally every single month. Most of them don't get deported. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Mark Kelly, they like it this way. This is an invasion. And she's just lying.
I read a statistic this morning that says that 70% of fentanyl that comes into this country comes through the Arizona border. How do we address that?
Well, I think, we need to finish the border wall. We need to get double probably the size of Border Patrol, if not more. We need to get those guys all the resources and technology they need. We just have to drive illegal crossings and drive fentanyl trafficking down to zero. Because fentanyl, it's so much worse than even a usual drug. I mean, methamphetamine's horrible, but fentanyl is poison, right? These deaths, they're not even overdose deaths, Mike, so much as poisonings. And dozens of thousands of American teenagers are dead now because of this open border, because of this fentanyl. Joe Biden caused it. Mark Kelly helped him cause it, hasn't lifted a finger to do anything to actually give border security. Quite the opposite. Actually, at every chance Mark Kelly's had to vote for border security, he said no. And we just need to take things in the opposite direction. It was working 3 years ago. We were building the border wall. We had Border Patrol. They were supported by the Trump administration. The Biden administration's just trying to hamstring our Border Patrol. They're trying to thin out our Border Patrol. And as a result, it's basically open borders. They've ceded the whole zone to the cartels, and they're murdering American citizens, American teenagers with this fentanyl. I guess now the news is that drug cartels are dressing up the fentanyl, painting it different colors to make it look like candy, rainbow fentanyl. They're making it look like candy in the weeks before Halloween.
Wow. And so when you look at the criticism or an observation from some is saying that even if the Republicans were to take over the House and the Senate, that the President of the United States still has immense power with policy and the people in place. How do you work with the White House to fix some of these issues that you're describing that you believe are bad for America? How does that happen?
I agree it'll be easier in January 2025 when we get a strong Republican back in the White House. We really do need to retake the White House. But my job in 2023 and 2024 in the Senate and a Republican-controlled Congress is to just obstruct Biden's agenda. I'm going to not vote for a single piece of Biden funding or a single appointee unless and until we get border security. I will hold Biden's agenda hostage so long as we have an open border. That's my pledge to the people of Arizona. Mark Kelly's done the opposite. A year ago, Mark Kelly could have called up Biden. And remember, Biden needs Mark Kelly's vote. The Senate is deadlocked right now, 50-50, and Kamala Harris breaks the tie. So Mark Kelly had tremendous power as a border state senator, as vote number 50. He could have said, President Biden, I'm not giving you a single thing, not a single piece of funding, not a single vote for an appointee or any prerogative, unless and until we finish the border wall and you arm the Border Patrol, you support these guys, unless and until we get border security. And Mark Kelly didn't do that, which means Mark Kelly is complicit. He's done more than anyone else to keep these borders open, and all the deaths and all the rapes and all the kidnappings that are occurring at the southern border because of the open border, that's on Mark Kelly. I'm going to do just the opposite and do everything humanly possible to seal that border and drive illegal crossings down to zero.
Well, Blake, we always appreciate the time with you coming on. I know you've got a busy schedule, and this is obviously this forum is so that candidates can speak their mind directly to voters and that voters in Arizona have a choice. So your last pitch to the voters here in Arizona.
Look, if you like the way things are going, if you like the wide open border and kids dying via fentanyl, if you like double-digit inflation and paying more, not just for gas and groceries, but for rent and utilities, if you like the FBI pressuring Facebook to censor information about a presidential candidate, to get involved and put their thumb on the scale and corrupt our elections. If you like all that, there's the Senate candidate for you. That's Mark Kelly. You should vote for him if you like Joe Biden and the way things are going. If you want to make a change, if you want to follow the Constitution, if you want 2% inflation instead of 20% inflation, if you want a secure border, if you want someone who's going to back the blue and support our police, I'm that change. Vote for me, vote Republican up and down the ticket so we can stop Joe Biden's disastrous agenda.
Blake, I appreciate the time.
Always good to see you, Mike. Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment in Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. Joining us now from the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, Danny Seiden. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
I can't wait to talk about this. You were the moderator, or I would say moderator, of a forum. How do you think that went? Your interpretation of how the event went?
for what we wanted to accomplish at the chamber, which was to get these candidates to come in front of the state's largest job creators and their guests and talk about business issues, talk about the economy. I mean, inflation is the number one issue, yet nobody's talking about it. In terms of that, I would say it was a success. We were able to, so far, we're the only people able to get both candidates in the same room at the same time talking about these issues. So I would say huge success.
So obviously not a debate format, which we've all had the argument between, what's happened with Katie Hobbs saying she's not going to do it. But how did you like the experience? Did you like that format better than a debate?
I do for this reason. We had a little bit more control and we could get them to answer questions. And I think the Republic headline was how they would govern. And that's a win for us. That's what we want people talking about. These social issues, the issues revolving around former President Donald Trump, those are distractions. Our voters really do care about their pocketbooks, how much the fact they're spending, almost $10,000 this year for the same goods that they spent less than 20 months ago. That matters. And to get them to talk about that, big win.
Let's talk about memorable moments. Was there an answer from one of them, or were you surprised by an answer? What were some memorable moments?
So memorable for me, we made some news because while we had Kari Lake on stage, she came right out of the gates and said, I want you to know this is the last forum I'm doing. Clean Elections has asked, Secretary Hobbs has asked Clean Elections to change it to a style like this. I won't do it. The people are entitled to a debate. And that's the letter we're sending back. We'll be sending that letter back today. So that was surprising to hear her come right out guns blazing. Because I'll say this, Kari Lake is very good on a stage. She's very good in front of a camera. So for her to put her foot down and say debate or nothing was a bold moment. So for Kari, that was my memorable moment. For Katie Hobbs, it was obviously when I asked her about taxes. I pointed out she's been pro-tax as long as we've known her. She supported Prop 208. But she came out and affirmatively said, taxes are not in my plan.
Did either candidate, in your mind, did either candidate struggle with a question? Or did it surprise you that they struggled with the question?
I wouldn't say that they struggled, but what surprised me was that because I think we were the first forum where it really focused on policy issues, we asked about water, we asked about energy. So to watch like Kari Lake answer that question from a policy perspective was interesting. Every now and then she'd weave in some national politics and some bigger issues, but she knew her stuff. She got her policy plan out there. And the same for Secretary Hobbs. She was able to give people a glimpse on how she would govern, very doors open to both sides. She talked about her bipartisanship in the past. You haven't heard that once on this trail. You haven't heard any of them. You haven't seen an ad talking about what they would do towards inflation. Kari said she'd go after sales tax, very savvy. A lot of things like that. I would say not struggle, but it was an interesting pivot for them.
So looking back for a moment, the 8 years of the Ducey governorship is coming to an end. How is this economy compared to where it was when he started? Are we in good shape even though we're the highest in inflation here in the Valley? How do you assess the Arizona economy?
One of the reasons we're the highest inflation in the country in Phoenix at 13% is because we're doing so well, because we've had such tremendous growth. We've had unprecedented growth with Governor Ducey and his policies over the last 8 years. We've gone from a data center economy and a service-based economy to an advanced manufacturing economy. And those jobs pay twice as much as their counterparts in the private sector. So Governor Ducey and his policies has forever changed Arizona's economy and made it more diverse. So whether there's a recession, whether there's deflation, we will survive and we will come out a lot faster and a lot better.
I always say it was intentional growth, which I thought was a great plan. So then let's talk about what happens in the next 10 years. What from your perspective, the Chamber's perspective, the challenge Arizona faces in its economy in the next 10 years?
Well, like everyone else in the whole country, we have a labor shortage in Arizona. And there's a big challenge in how we answer that labor shortage. Are we going to continue to feed the pipeline through our universities and community colleges and do a better job with trades and changing those programs up? Are we going to figure out legal migration as a solution? We have TSMC coming here, and we're going to have a lot of people coming over from that wonderful country. We were just on a trip there, and we learned just how valuable that relationship is and how they think of Arizona. So I think that's a challenge. But over the next 10 years, you have water. You got to pay attention to what you're doing with water. You got to pay attention to where we are with housing. Mike, you and I have talked about that a lot.
Yep.
I don't think we've been strategic enough in housing, and I think you're going to see a lot of pushback on local governments in this upcoming session to address that, and it's a good thing.
I always love talking to you, man. You know more about this than just about anybody in the States. So thanks for doing this, and I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
That's Danny Seiden. We'll be back in a moment on Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. A very special guest, former governor of the state of Arizona, Jan Brewer. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm honored to be here with you.
This is election season. You get called on so much because of your experience. You have so much legislative experience, so much time in the Secretary of State's office, but you've also been the chief executive. Let's talk about running for that office. Big heated conversation about debates going on right now. Where do you stand on the idea? Do all candidates need to debate?
I think it's real important for the public to see people to be able to contrast them with their policies and their ideas and their presentations, so they get a better feeling for it. Because everybody doesn't come in contact with you; they just hear you or read about you in the paper or hear you on the radio or something. But to be there together, I think it's a good thing.
And it's a complex machine. There's ads on the radio and television that give a picture. There are speeches where you talk about your policies, but really people can dig in a debate scenario, correct? And that's where you really learn how they can defend their positions.
And it's your opportunity to defend your positions and be able to do it in detail and, and straightforward with the person. And I know that debates sometimes get very contentious. I had kind of one of the biggest flubs ever, but I recovered, and I won my election.
Well,
But I showed up. I think that's the important thing. And I wasn't afraid. I was just overwhelmed with what was being said prior to when I went kind of blank for a few seconds.
So that's kind of been an infamous moment for you. But like you said, you recovered. But I think it's also the way you took it in stride and saying, yeah, I screwed up or whatever, and kind of laughed at yourself about it.
Right.
But you had proven yourself so much before that and after. Do you think that's your record is what helped them see that as just a snapshot and not who you really were?
Well, I hope so.
It worked out.
Hope so. Yeah, I did. So it was the right thing for me to do is to show up. But it was in the primary, and it was ugly. It was an ugly primary, and I had all of them after me at the time. But I recovered, and I think that it's important that if you run for public office, that you go on with your debates, at least as we do here in Arizona, at least once appear, and people can judge you or not judge you. And the ones that don't care, they don't have to watch you. But and you can maintain your decorum. I mean, you can sit there and just talk about the things you want to talk about.
Right. Do you get asked to coach people or advise people, whether it's debates or campaigns? Because you've had many campaigns.
Oh, I get called upon for advice or opinions or how would they handle certain things, and where do you go if this should happen, those kinds of things. Yeah.
So you would have you, and that's probably an odd question, but since she's a gubernatorial candidate, has Katie Hobbs reached out to you and asked or talked to you about whether or not she should debate? Is there any kind of conversation?
No, she hasn't. At this point in time, she hasn't.
Because I know that you've been one of the people that's very staunch in your political beliefs, but you're also known as somebody that has friends across the gamut of politics.
I'm blessed, and that has been the way it has been since I was first in the Arizona House of Representatives. It wasn't so divided as it is today, I don't think, because it's important that you work with people on both sides of the aisle.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why people are saying that debates have become unnecessary, is because they get so contentious that you really don't get a word in edgewise. But especially when it's a one-on-one debate, it can get contentious, but it doesn't normally get out of control.
No.
So when you would prepare for a debate, were you preparing for what you were going to say, or were you preparing what you were going to counter what your opponent was going to say?
Both. I think we briefed ourselves and we spoke, and we had mock debates to say what my policies were going to be and being able to condense them into a certain format, et cetera, et cetera. And then we would go into, what if this happens or what if that happens and what your response would be. But when you get up there, it's a lot different situation than sitting in a boardroom or around a kitchen table to discuss it. So, and you want to be successful. So there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure.
But don't you think, correct me if I'm wrong, if you are not just solid in what you believe, but why you believe it, then there really isn't much that's going to trip you up, because you can always defend what you believe if you truly believe it and know why.
That's true, because you know what your philosophy is and you just stick to it.
Have the issues in your mind for Arizona, have the issues changed much since you were governor?
No, they really haven't. Not since I was in the legislature. I mean, usually it's education, public protection.
Yeah.
Balancing the budget, health. Those are the main issues. I mean, and it's just constantly. Of course, now we're faced with a huge water issue, but that was there way back in 1982 when Jane Hull addressed it, the Groundwater Act, you know, so.
I would love to talk, this is completely off topic, but that topic alone, what Senator John Kyle did in Washington, D.C., but Governor Hull addressing that issue really got us to where we are. But this now, the next governor is going to have to really be on this issue.
Going to be a huge issue for the next governor that's elected. And they're going to have good policy people surrounding them to advise them, and they're going to have to do a lot of homework.
I want to say thanks because we've known each other for so long. You are always so much fun to talk to, but to do this and kind of give people some behind the scenes talk about debating, because it's been battled around whether it should be done or not, but you've done it so many times, you're more of an expert. So I really appreciate you coming down and doing this.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me.
Governor Jan Brewer, we'll be back here in a moment on Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. A big thank you to our candidate Blake Masters for joining us today, and a special thank you to Danny Seiden and Governor Jan Brewer. This Tuesday, September 20th, is National Voter Registration Day. If you haven't registered to vote, now is the perfect time to do so. We have a link where you can go to do that, aztv.com/vote. Next week, we're talking with the candidates for Arizona's governor's race, Republican Kari Lake and Democrat Katie Hobbs. Join us next week right here on Before You Vote.